Hey folks, this is Vishal from Equity Guru, and we're going to talk a bit about Japan. Of course, if you have been, a subscriber of this channel, if you read my work up on Equity Guru, a couple of months ago we were talking about the fall of the yen. We were talking about Bank of Japan and how it's one of the most consequential central banks out there because every other central bank is in a hawkish, aggressive monetary policy, while the Bank of Japan is maintaining its negative rates. There was a bit of excitement recently with a new Bank of Japan governor, their first academic governor in a long time, and there's talks that hey, this might be the guy to end the dovish policy and maybe just give this hint of the Bank of Japan going hawkish, right? Not necessarily raising interest rates, but maybe adjusting their yield curve control. But instead, what we heard was that this new central bank governor will take about a year or a year and a half to review the policy, the previous policy, and then assess if that assess if a hawkish policy is warranted. Which just in a way, people are saying it just buys time for the Bank of Japan, and it's just a nice way of saying, hey, we're going to remain dovish, and essentially by that time, a year or a year and a half goes. Other central banks might be cutting interest rates due to recession, and then the Bank of Japan really doesn't have to do much and can continue its current policy. So obviously, a lot of people have looked at that and have said that the Japanese yen is going to be taking a hit. I've talked a lot about what that means, what a weaker yen means in terms of U.S. treasuries, because a lot of these funds in Japan and a lot of investment money in Japan looks to buy foreign debt because it yields, much higher, of course. But with a weakening yen, this talks that a lot of money might look domestically rather than internationally because of, as I said, the currency exchange rate. But I wouldn't say that that would be a huge amount. You're not going to see like this huge amount of money just like leave treasury markets and return to Japan. But recent headlines have gotten people now thinking about Japan, and that is because one man here, of course, Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, all of you know who he is, the Oracle of Omaha. And Buffett has this sort of this following where when he invests into something or when he sees something, a lot of other funds tend to follow, right? Because of course he has a stellar track record, and some would say the best investor of all time. Well, he is now going pretty big into Japan. Buffett has recently said that he feels more comfortable holding Japanese assets than assets in Taiwan. Of course, there's been that video on social media where Buffett was asked why he sold some of his Taiwan semiconductor position, and he mentioned, of course, geopolitics with the U.S. and China and Taiwan, of course. A lot of people say that he probably sees geopolitical, relationships deteriorating in the future. And he is now moving a lot of his money or is jumping into Japan. And for some people, it's a surprise. But to someone like me, it wasn't necessarily a big surprise because Buffett is known for being, a value investor, right? So he looks for these good companies that are paying nice dividends, that have consistent businesses. And Japan is like the haven, or it is like the place for these value stocks, right? Because many of these companies make profits, they pay dividends, and some say, this is the thing about Japanese culture and business culture. They don't tend to change things a lot, right? They like to keep things how things are going, and that means that they provide that consistent dividend and that consistent businesses. Not necessarily a place maybe that you want to go for growth stocks. And when we look at the Nikkei, you'll sort of see what has happened with the Nikkei chart. But Buffett has jumped into 5 of the big Japanese trading houses, and these are it's sort of hard to describe what these companies sort of do because there's not really a model like that anywhere else in the world. But basically, these trading houses, they are into a whole bunch of businesses, right? They are trading companies involved in critical upstream businesses such as resources, energy, but they are also in downstream businesses which are closer to the consumers, such as food and healthcare. They generally have, stable demand because of the sectors that they are in, and they can switch assets when necessarily. As this article here on Asia Nikkei says, that these models or business models are basically unmatched anywhere in the world. And the five houses that, or the five trading companies that Berkshire Hathaway or Warren Buffett has jumped into are ITOCHU Corp, Marubeni Corp, Mitsubishi Corp, Mitsui, and Sumitomo. So some of these are, I'm sure you've heard of Mitsubishi. Some people have heard of Sumitomo, especially if you follow the agriculture space as well. And as I said, they have tons of businesses from energy to minerals to food and other natural resources. And these companies derive their revenue from non-trade activities and have built up interest in everything from logistics to real estate, frozen foods, aerospace, and also newer investments such as EVs and renewable energy. So Buffett, he did visit Japan just recently in April. This was actually before the new governor was going to give his meeting and his statement. And Berkshire Hathaway has boosted its investment in Japanese trading houses to 7.4%. And overseas investors are following suit, buying $7.83 billion in Japanese stocks during the 5 days of trading through April 14th. And of course, the Oracle of Omaha, when he does something, other funds and other money will follow along. So I am now, I've always been watching, Japan for quite some time, but I think you're going to be seeing a lot of other money tend to look at Japan. And as many have said, just in these recent past weeks, the Japanese markets have sort of outperformed the U.S. markets in this sort of short time frame. They're sort of also diverging from other markets, like other Asian markets, like the Kospi in Korea, and also the Chinese markets. Of course, the Chinese markets, though, had their big run up with money running into Chinese bank stocks. But the interesting thing here about the Nikkei is I am watching a big technical level around the 30,000 zone. And I believe that when we see a breakout around this 30,000 zone, I think there's a very real chance that you're going to be seeing a lot of funds, hedge funds, and a lot of other big institutional funds, potentially retail crowd as well, looking to play that breakout. Because as you can see, literally since 2021, the Japanese Nikkei has been just ranging between these levels. And maybe some of you can see, if I zoom out a little bit, I have a trend line here as well, which funnily enough, I drew a long time ago, but it is connecting these dots in 2021, these highs in 2021 and in September 2021 and March of 2021. And if we do get a breakout above 30K, we would also see a breakout above this downtrend line. And let me take you back. Let's go on a monthly chart so you guys see where I am drawing this trend line from. Whoa, take a look at that. So the reason I have this trend line is I'm connecting all the highs here going back to 1989. Yes, folks. So even if the Nikkei breaks above 30K, we still have about 8,000 points, 8 to 9,000 points before we even test previous all-time record highs printed on the Japanese Nikkei, which occurred during the boom economy of the 80s. So there's still, a slight recovery. Now, I always find this market very interesting given, the money printing, the lower interest rates. I think a lot of people are surprised that hasn't led to just, markets breaking out all-time record highs, right? So very interesting spot. And I think, if we do get that break above 30,000, a lot of people are going to be looking at Japan and the Japanese stock markets. And we've talked about this in the past as well, this run into value stocks, right? And Japan might be the place to do it. If you follow the currency realm, the Japanese yen is often thought of as a safe haven because of how stable the country is. And you could also throw in, the Swiss franc there as well. But the Japanese yen tends to have a positive correlation with gold prices as well. So a lot of people say, the US dollar is the safe haven, and then the safe haven from the safe haven is gold and the Japanese yen. So, a lot of interesting things happening there, especially now with Warren Buffett, and he might be sparking this huge run. As I said, watch that 30,000 zone on the Nikkei. If you are not a trader of futures or CFDs, but you are Canadian, there is also a Canadian Japanese ETF, which is CJP, which tracks a lot of these Japanese stocks. And while it's already breaking out, I think there's actually a retracement, not much volume, but this is of course an ETF that tends to follow Japan, and it did actually print new all-time record highs this week, breaking above $19.50. So if you are bullish on Japan, as Warren Buffett is, then CJP iShares Japan Fundamental Index might be the ETF for you to ride along in the Japanese move. And as I said, if you break above 30K, I think it's going to bring a significant amount of eyes to the Japanese markets. Watch to see potential Japanese yen strength, because of course, if you want to invest in Japan, you have to buy your yen and then use that yen to buy Japanese stocks. So potentially see a demand in the Japanese yen as well, which might catch some people on a surprise, just given the recent price action in the Japanese yen, which of course, as this chart moves higher, it means the Japanese yen is weakening or depreciating, but we are seeing some signs of possible recovery and strength in the Japanese yen here. So a lot of things I've talked about in this video, but someone with a macro view, I think it's very important to look at other markets, right? Especially Asia. A lot of us tend to be focused on the U.S. markets, but there are other markets out there doing different things. And if you want to track these macro money flows, some people are looking at this as, okay, maybe Buffett's not very bullish on the U.S., right? And he did sort of mention something about the U.S. might have some issues in the next few months. And now he's looking at Japan. So obviously he sees something, and when a large fund or large investor like Buffett moves, as I said, it tends to bring the eyes and money of people all around the world. So keep an eye out on this story. I think it's very interesting. I'm going to be watching that 30K zone on that Nikkei there. But that's it for me, folks. Let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed this video. Be sure to give it a thumbs up, and let me know what you think about investing in Japan. Is this something that you would do? Do you think Buffett is maybe mistaken? Of course, a lot of people are bringing up the idea of geopolitics because, of course, China's in the area, and if something happens there, then Japan would obviously be affected as well. But yeah, give me your thoughts below. I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about this story. Yeah, I'll catch you guys all in the next Chart Attack video.